Today we are going to discuss about the topic of listening skills. Start with the introduction of the listening skills. So listening skills is the ability to accurately receive and interpret messages in the communication process. Listening is a key to effective communication. Without the ability to listen effectively, messages are easily misunderstood. Effective listening is a skill that underpins all positive human relationships. To listen, we need to make a concise effort not to just hear what people are saying, but to take in it, digest it, and understand. Not only does listening enhance your ability to understand better and make you a better communicator, it also makes the experience of speaking to your enjoyable to other people. Listening, basically, if we can easily understood that what people can say to us. Listening is often confused with learning and hearing. While hearing is a biological process that can be scientifically explained, listening is a neurological cognitive reading, the progressive of auditory stimuli received by the auditory systems. To listen is to give attention to sound or action. When listening, one is hearing what others are saying and try to understand what it means. The act of listening involves complex affective, cognitive, and behavioral process. Basically, listening means to pay attention to someone or something in order to hear what is being said, sung, played, etc. Used to tell a person to listen to what you are saying, to hear what someone has said, and understand that is serious, important, and true. Listening is an important skill. Listening is quite similar to reading as it involves reception and recording of the verbal message from the other person. The following X illustrate importance of listening. In a biological class, teacher asked the students to refer a book title like Origin of Species. One of the students sincerely went to library, searched to the catalog of library, looking for book named Orange and Peaches. But to his utter dismay, he could not find it. When he approached the teacher, he found that the book was entitled Origin of Species. This is what happens when there is lack of concentration in listening. Listening is personally attentive and responsive communication that leads to awareness, understanding, and empathy. Close attention to and processing of others' point of view in an effort to understand. Listening skills allow one to make sense and understand what another person is saying. Good listening skills make workers more productive. The ability to listen carefully allows workers to better understand assignments they are given. They are able to understand what is expected of them by their management. Listening versus hearing. In this, Merriam-Webster defines hearing as the process, function, or power of perceiving sound, especially the special sense by which noises and tones are received as stimuli. Listening, on the one hand, means to pay attention to sound, to hear something with thoughtful attention, and to give considerations. Hearing is much easier than listening because hearing is an involuntary physical ability involving the ears. No conscious effort is required. As one of the five senses, hearing happens all the time and is the voluntary receiving of sound, vibrations, or waves through our ears. Hear means that sounds come into your ear whether you want it or not. While listen means that you consciously pay attention to what you are here, that is, you went to hear something. Can you hear the bird singing in the garden? I'm listening, but I can't hear anything. First of all, the listening process. The listening process involves the four stages like receiving, understanding, evaluating, and responding. Hearing and listening are not the same. People may often use these words interchangeably. In fact, hearing is slowly, depends on the ear, is a physical act. Everyone can hear without deliberate effort. Hearing is merely vibration of sounds on the ear, drum followed by electrochemical response. On the other hand, listening requires voluntary attention and then making sense of what is being said. Effective listening helps to resolve conflicts, build trust, inspire people, and strengthen term. That's especially important to learn. Spend most of our conversations listening, and you will observe the information as it is given to you. In this, there is a many good qualities of listening skills. Firstly, they have fully present. They don't listen to respond. They react. In the moment. They don't have an agenda. They don't jump to give advice. They never interrupt. They ask follow-up questions. They listen as much they speak. They show that they are listening. They are patient. They listen to learn. They have interested in what the speaker is interested in. They summarize what they have heard. That's all. You can see the picture Major difference, what kind of listening and what kind of hearing. So we have a types of listening. In the types of listening, basically we have many kinds of listening. There are various forms of listening. These are as follows. First is casual listening. Casual listening basically is to listen someone or something without much attention and concentration. This type of listening has no specific purpose and all. Casual listening is listening without reacting, allowing someone to speak without interrupting. Casual listening is one-way communication where the receiver doesn't provide feedback or ask questions and may or may not understand the sender's message. Next is focused listening. Focused listening basically is intentional and systematic process. The listener gives his full attention and concentration on what the speaker is saying to get information, knowledge, and ideas. This type of listening is also considered as intensive listening. Focused listening is a strategy that guides students to listen closely to a text. It helps students to listen attentively with no directions and to identify key points and ideas. Focused listening involves more than just hearing someone speak. When you practice active listening, you are fully concentrating on what is being said. You listen with all of your senses and give your full attention to the person speaking. In this way, active listening is the opposite of passive listening. Next is the active listening. Active listening basically that kind of listening, also called attentive listening. Active listening involves attention, careful, consideration, concentration of the speaker's idea. The listener participates in communication process actively and attentively. The listener nods his head, leans forward, or show positive body language, which supports and encourages the speaker to communicate more enthusiastically. This is positive type of listening. Active listening is a technique of careful listening and observation of non-verbal cues with feedback in the form of accurate paraphrasing. This is used in counseling, training, and solving disputes or conflicts. Active listening is a way of listening and responding to another person that improves mutual understanding. Active listening refers to a pattern of listening that keeps you engaged with your conversation partner in a positive way. It is the process of listening attentively while someone else speaks, paraphrasing and reflecting back what is said, and withholding judgment and advice. Next is the passive listening. Passive listening basically a very term rigid and orthodox type of listening. This type of listening may create confusion in the mindset of the speaker about true intention of the listener. The listener wears a flat face, serious expressions surrounding all gestures that are used in active listening. Sometimes passive listening is used to show status of the listeners. Passive listening is listening without reacting, allowing someone to speak without interrupting. Passive listening is one-way communication where the receiver doesn't provide feedback and ask questions and may or may not understand the sender's message. You do that by asking questions, reading their body language, and making observations. I'm giving you some examples of passive listening that are listening to presentations, the radio, and even watching movies. In the workplace, you have to strike a balance between the passive and active listening depending on the situations. Next is the critical listening. In the critical listening, also called as evaluating listening, this type of listening involves critical evaluation of the speakers throughout and ideas. The listener assesses speaker's depth of knowledge, choice of words, and tone and style of the listener. This type of listening is used to seminars, conferences, group discussions, and other formal type of interactions. Critical listening is a process for understanding what is said and evaluating, judging, and forming an opinion on what you hear. The listener assesses the strength and weaknesses of the content, agrees or disagree with the information, and analyzes and synthesizes material. Critical listening is a form of listening that is usually not mentioned since it involves analysis, critical thinking, and judgment. Making judgments during listening is often considered as a barrier to understanding a person. Next is the appreciative listening. Appreciative listening basically type of listening appreciates and supports the speaker. The listeners encourages and motivates the speaker to speak more and more. Appreciative listening is a type of listening behavior where the listener seeks certain information which they will appreciate and meet his or her needs and goals. One use appreciative listening when listening to music, poetry, or the stirring words of a speech. The goal of appreciative listening is to make the speaker feel valued and truly understood without judgment. By combining active listening with positive psychology, our appreciate listening framework makes it simple and even fun to listen to those who we agree and may disagree with. Next is the pretentive listening. In the pretentive listening is also called a false listening. The listener pretends as if he is listening attentively to the speakers, whereas the listener is not paying attention to the speaker. Even listeners may nod his head, smile at the speaker, lean forward, or he will pretend to write down something. The speaker is under false impressions that listener is paying attention. Basically, the listener encourages and motivates the speaker to speak more and more. Pretentive listening. Pretentive listening, also called as a false listening. The listener pretends comprehensive listening is the next level of critical listening that humans usually develop in early childhood. Next is traits of a good listeners. What kind of traits? First of all, being non-evaluative. If you are an active listener, your verbal and non-verbal behavior should suggest to the speaker that he is being properly heard and understood. It should not indicate what you think about a person. The purpose is to communicate overlooking the qualities of the speaker. The behavior of the listener should convey the impressive that you accept the person without making judgment of right or wrong, good or bad, suitable or unsuitable. We have to being non-evaluated, paraphrasing, reflecting implication, reflecting hidden feelings, inviting further contribution, and responding non-verbally. Being non-evaluated, if you are an active listener, your verbal and non-verbal actions will suggest your understanding. It will show that speakers is properly here. Next is the paraphrasing. Paraphrasing basically, if you wish to clarify a point, you can simply summarize what the speaker has said and inquire the speaker whether you have heard it accurately or not. Paraphrasing means formulating someone else's ideas in your own words. To paraphrase a source, you have to rewrite a passage without changing the meaning of the original text. Paraphrasing is an alternative to quoting where you can someone's exact words and put them in quotation marks. Next, we have a responding non-verbally. In responding non-verbally, basically, listener can portray his image as that of an active listener by adopting certain postures and sending nonverbal signals which communicates the listener's interest in what the speaker is saying. This may include eye contact, leaning forward towards the listeners, head nodding. Listener can also use someone respective utterance like yes to indicate that message of speaker is being understood. Basically, in this, nonverbal communication types include facial expressions, gestures, paralinguistic, such as loudness or tone of voice, body language, proxemises or personal space, eye gaze, haptics, appearance, and artificates. Next, we have a barriers to effective communication. Barriers of effective listening. The factors which are creating barriers in effective listening are as following. First of all, we have external distractions, speaker distractions, message intent, semiotics, emotional language, personal perspective. That's it. First of all, we have environmental conditions. In environmental conditions like humidity, temperature, atmosphere, limits the listener's span of listening. Cloudy atmosphere may cause the listener to sleep. Environmental conditions means the state of the environment, including natural resources, soil, surface water, groundwater, any present or potential drinking water supply, subsurface strata, or ambient air relating to or arising out of the use, handling, storage, treatment, and recycle. Next is the space distance. In the space distance between the speaker and the listener from long distance may affect the listening process. If the speaker is speaking from long distance, the listener may struggle to grasp what the speaker is speaking. Some of the words may be misunderstood by their listeners. The shortest distance between Earth and space is about 62 miles straight up, which by general accord in where the planet's boundary ends and subordinate space begins. Next is the omniscient attitude of the listener. In this, many people consider themselves as know-all men. They think that they have perfect knowledge of everything in the world. According to them, listening to others is pure waste of time. They are not listening to the speakers because they think that they already know what he is going to say. Next is the infrastructure. Infrastructure, poor infrastructure affect listening process, lack of proper ventilation, light, acoustics can act as a barrier to listening. Infrastructure is the general term for the basic physical system of a business, region, or nation. In this, we can example of the infrastructure include transportation system, communication networks, sewage, water, and electric system. Next is the speed of the speaker. So speed of the speaker in this Speed of the speaker can act as a barrier to listening. If the speaker is speaking too speedily, the listeners have no other alternative left than watching speaker. The human brain receives sounds at a specific speed. If this sound is not maintained properly, the listeners may get distracted. A typical speaking rate for English is 4 syllables per sound, but in different emotional or social contexts, the rate may vary. One study reporting a range between 3.3 and 5.9 seconds. Another study found significant differences in speaking rate between storytelling and taking part in an interview. Next, we have a speaker's nonverbal communication. Speaker's nonverbal communication basically no issue of facial expression, gestures, body language, eye contact, and other factors can create barriers to listening. If the speaker relies only on verbal expressions, the listener will be tried to construct the bombardment of words and verbal expressions. Nonverbal communication is one of the most challenging aspects of public speaking, as well as one of the most impactful. However, nonverbal communication is virtually impossible to monitor during a presentation because your mind is busy remembering your talking point and watching audience reactions. Next, voice and tone of the speaker. Basically, the listener will feel bored and fed up to listen to monotonous speech. If the speaker's voice is not audible, the listeners may not listen to the alternative. On the contrary, many speakers maintain a monotonous tone which irritates the listeners. Tone of voice is how the character of your business comes through in your words, both written and spoken. It's not about what you say, but rather the way you say it and the impression it makes on everyone in your audience who reads or hear you think about it. The listeners will feel bored and fed up. On the contrary, in this, we can authoritative, caring, cheerful, coarse, conservative, conventional, casual, and dry. Next, we have a lack of factual information. Lack of factual information means information that solely deal with facts. It is short, non-explanatory, and rarely gives in-depth background on a topic. Many times listeners do not listen alternatively and carefully because he doesn't find any factual information in the speech. Next is the language of the speaker. So the language of the speaker basically English, Mandarin, Spanish, French, Arabic, Russian, and Portuguese. If the speaker is using high technical jargons and difficult words, the listener will be clueless about the meaning of those words. They will try to find meaning of those words instead of listening is to the speaker. Next, we have a horn effect in the listeners. So the horn effect of the listeners is basically that kind of term. The horn effect is technically to underestimate a person as bad in all the fields because he is bad in one of the field. The listeners reject and nullify the speaker's chance to speak for more amount of time because listeners dislike the speakers. The horn effect, a type of cognitive bias, happens when you make a snap judgment about someone on the basis of one negative trait. Your bias led you to judge him by one trait, baldness, which your brain connected to that negative past experience. Next, we have a span of the speech. Span of the speech basically the process of listening can take place for a limited period of time. If the speaker is speaking for hours together, the listener turns into attentive listeners. Next, we have a techniques to improve the listening skills. First of all, motivate yourself to listen. In this, listeners should motivate their mind to listen to the speaker carefully, and individuals should know the value and importance of listening. Respect the people. So we have, even if the listener disagrees with some of the ideas and of the speaker, they should show their disagreement positively. Next, remove horn effect. Many people are like rough diamonds, and however, listeners should not insult or dislike the speaker. We have a positive body language. Listeners should maintain positive body language like nod of head, leaning forward, maintain effort postures, and during communication. So in this, many listeners revolve pen, notebook, or any other object in their hand. Don't interrupt. Moreover, many listeners repeat the words and expression of the speakers loudly. So this is not like to listen interruption while speaking from someone. Improve your listening span. Many a times we have to listen to speeches or lectures for long duration. So it is not good. Otherwise, listeners will be observing these body movements and thereby neglect ideas and expressions of the speaker. It also creates the interesting atmosphere in the audience and they pay more attention to the speakers. It creates an environment for effective listening. We have to use simple sight. Use of heavy technical words may distract the speaker and affect the process of listening. Listening should be tough at a skill. The skill should be tough to students, just like speaking, reading, and writing skills. So there should be sufficient practice and opportunities to enhance their listening ability. So what kind of benefits of listening? Better understanding assignments and what is expected of you. Build rapport with co-workers, bosses, and clients. Show support. Work better in a team-based environment. Resolve problems with customers, co-workers, and bosses. Answer questions and find underlying meanings in what others says. So thank you so much. I hope you're clear about what kind of effective listening skills we have and how we can build it in ourselves. So thank you so much.